YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Looking up sun at my lawn at 9:20 in the morning. And if you look really closely, you'll see that the grass is sparkling. The sparkles are caused by dew. Now you only get dew when there's pretty much zero wind, and the wind has started. The trees are moving, so technically you wouldn't expect there to be much dew left on the ground. Kind of 3 hours after sunrise, but as you can see, it's wet. And whereas the outer leaves on the eastern and northern side of the trees are sunlit, they're actually forming a shade canopy for all of the leaves further inside the branch bundles of leaves which hang point down on both wattle trees and eucalyptus. Whereas inside the bunches of downward pointing leaves on the south side, on the west side, everything's still in shade. So the relatively warm air is still contacting cold, dense, wax-covered leaves. Same thing is going on with the swimming pool cover. It's a water repellent surface. It's colder than the air that's touching it, so water condenses onto it. Likewise, on the plastic of the rain gauge on the outside, we still have dewdrops condensing. Particularly on the parts that are still in shadow. There's no sunlight to warm the plastic up. The surrounding air is warmer than the plastic, and therefore we're getting condensation on the plastic. If I wipe the condensation away, affording a clear view of the scale gauge inside the bucket, what we find down there is that we have a significant amount of measured dewfall, which is still not quite finished evaporating from the inside of the black plastic bucket, the top of which is now in dappled sunlight. What we have showing there, I'm going to say, is 0.35 of a millimetre. Now I know it may not seem like much, but as far as the forest floor is concerned, 1/3 of a millimetre. Now, in the old money, so to speak, a millimetre is, well, it's a 1/25 of an inch, correct? 25 millimetres to the inch. And in the old money, an inch was 100 points, correct? So 1 millimetre is 4 points. And if you've got 1/3 of a millimetre, you've got about 1.5 points of rain. or moisture, precipitation, wetness falling down out of the sky. In this case, that third of a millimetre, 1.5 points, that has descended onto each and every acre of the 100 acres that I pay rates on. And an acre is, funny thing, it's 66 feet, which is a spear throw, by 660 feet, which is a bow shot. 666, I think. So anyway, a spear throw by a bow shot is an acre. And 1 point of rain on 1 acre of land is 224 gallons. And an imperial gallon of water weighs 10 pounds. So it's 2,240 pounds or 1 tonne of water per acre per point of precipitation. So what you're looking at in that rain gauge is definitive proof that last night I got 1.5 tonnes of water airdropped on each acre, 150 tonnes last night. And a tonne of water dropped out of a clear blue sky costs the fire brigade $350 a tonne to throw it out of a fixed wing aeroplane. It costs them $550 a tonne to throw it out of a helicopter. So in practical terms, what that there represents is about $500,000 worth of free water received by the forest floor that I pay rates on last night. And actually, it might even be a bit better than that, because that measurement was taken out underneath a patch of totally clear sky. And what the forest floor receives is what drips off the trees. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, eucalyptus and wattle trees in particular come equipped with leaves which are relatively thick, relatively hard, covered in a waxy coating, and they have a pointed tip. So they get very cold and they stay cold, and then as soon as they get some slightly warm air on them, they form condensation droplets, just like that one has there. And with the waxy coating, it's easy for the drops to coalesce, overcome their surface tension and friction, and succumb to gravity, and then they drop off the point. So, under the trees, I've heard of research done by the University of New England in Armidale where they reckon that they've done dewfall measurement tests on the ground under the trees, and they reckon the effect of the eucalyptus and wattle leaves acting as wind trap precipitators is such that they're getting as much as 500% more dew underneath the forest than you get out in the clearing. So I might have actually got 1.5 millimetres on the ground under the trees on my 40 hectare endangered species sanctuary, because I got 0.35 of a millimetre out of the clear air that had no trees to act as wind trap precipitators. And really the only way to find out is that I'm going to have to buy myself a second rain gauge and start taking double parallel dewfall measurements, both on the forest floor, under the canopy, in various locations, to capture and measure and record the effect of the condensation dropping off the leaves, which I'm pleased to be able to show is still occurring at 13 minutes to 10. The leaves are still wet and speckled with dew on their shaded surfaces. So the effect is real, it's pronounced, you can see it, I'm not dreaming it. So that's kind of more or less the next step in the plan, is get myself another Anally-Retentive Rain-Guage and build a system where I can move it around across the forest floor and discover whether, when I get 0.35 of a millimetre here, I might be getting, I don't know, 1.5 millimetres out there under the wind trap precipitators. And this, in my mind, explains why the forest is the last place to dry out and the clearings out in the valley, the allegedly productive land, is the first place to dry off and go brown anytime the rain switches off. Is they've only got what condenses on the leaves of the grass or comes down vertically out of the sky, in the same way that this rain gauge only has what comes vertically down out of the sky to go into its collector and then fill its measuring gauge so that I can tell how much dewfall I receive. And for those of you who insist on staying metrificated, I'm pretty sure that a millimetre on a hectare is 10 tonnes of water. So the metric people can have something like an even answer as well. But 1 point of rain, the 100th part of an inch on 1 acre, 66 feet by 660 feet, 1 tonne of water. 1 point, 1 acre, 1 tonne. That's the way to feel good about small amounts of precipitation. You can look at a bit of dew in the gauge and see yourself having received $300,000, $500,000 overnight. And if you've got trees, it might be 1.5 million, because that's what it would cost you to burn fossil fuels and have somebody spray it industrially over the land that you are responsible for. Warbles on at the YouTube. Ciao.